Hi everyone. Uh, when I had the business, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I'm a gunsmith, right? And I did. I had a business operated out of my home. Uh, basically, I had a big house. I had the top flat. My parents had the bottom flat, and I had the business in the basement. And the customers would come, and they would come to my parents' door, and I'd do business there. It was really good for my parents because I mean they were in their 70s, and my dad was in the 80s, in his 80s when I started the business. Uh, and I really think it kept them going because they had something to do, and I think a lot of people get up in years and they don't have anything to do and they just waste away. But that's a different story. Anyway, what happened was is that this gentleman came in. He was German, and he had a little Savage over and under 20 gauge 22. Uh, you've seen them, and the buttstock was broke. And he asked me if I had a buttstock. I said, yeah, I got one. He said, how much? And I said, it's used. I said, $40 installed. He said, yeah, gee, great. When can you do it? I'll do it now for you. And so he stayed there, and he was talking to my mom. And I went downstairs and replaced the buttstock, came up, gave him his gun. It only took, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes. And he said to me, he said, have you ever worked on any Russian weapons? And I said, oh yeah. I said, you know. He said, what do you think of them? And I said, well, they're not sophisticated. They're crude but effective, very well made, and very effective. He said, exactly. He goes, during the war, he said, their tanks would come out, there'd be chunks of weld on them. They wouldn't be painted, they just put a number on them. Some of them would have nothing but a wooden crate to sit on for the drivers. I could see my mother was brewing something right out of the corner of my eye. And I thought, oh my God, what's she going to say? And I said, yeah, I heard that. And, I said, so you were on the Russian front? He said, yeah. And I said, you survived? I said, what were you in? He said, Panzers. I said, oh yeah. I said, well, that's interesting. And then my mother, she goes, what the hell happened? And the man looked at me, he said, excuse me? He was a very polite man. Excuse me? So what the hell happened? We were expecting you to hold the Russians, but we came in the back door. I went, what? The first I heard of this. I said, well, what are you talking about? She said, you must realize, we weren't at war with the German people. They're our cousins. You're part German. I said, yeah. She goes, but they're your cousins. We weren't at war with them. We were at war with Hitler and the Nazis. Right? And we wanted the Germans to hold the Russians as far back in Russia as they could. Right? You let us down. And he said, well, I'm sorry, ma'am, but we were kind of overwhelmed. We did our best. She goes, you didn't do good enough. This poor guy is like exasperated. I don't think he's ever heard anything like this before. I know I didn't hear anything like this before. Right? So he paid me off. He went. I said, what the hell was that? And she said, well, she said, don't believe the bullshit that they say on television and the Russians were our allies and all this kind of stuff. We may have been allied to them, but we didn't like them. Nobody did. Right? They were communists. And we wanted them as far back in Russia as they could be. Right? And if the Germans had held them back in Russia, we wouldn't have had as much trouble with Europe. We lost half of Europe to the Russians. Right? And then she made a disparaging remark to Roosevelt and Eisenhower and a few others, and saying sucking up to the Russians and doing this, that, and the other thing. And I went, wow. So, like, I had never heard this. But basically, she was saying that most people expected the Germans to hold the Russians. And I went, I hadn't heard that. She said, no, you wouldn't hear that. because of the propaganda. Right? So it got me to thinking. I was thinking about stuff the other day. I was thinking, you know, there's one thing when we talk amongst ourselves, and then there's the official story. And it doesn't always gel, you know what I mean? But anyway, I thought it was a humorous story about my mother and the poor German. And I'm going to tell you, that poor man had the most confused look on his face. Shocked. I was shocked. But that was my mom. She'd say, hey, anything to virtually anybody. Anyway, till the next time.